My name is Samuel Grant, and I'm 82 years old. I've lived alone for more years than I care to count. No wife. No children. No grandkids running around asking for candy. Just me, four walls, and memories that won't let me sleep at night. People ask me sometimes, when they find out I'm a veteran, they ask, what was the war like? And I never know how to answer. Because how do you explain that the worst night of your life was also the most beautiful? How do you tell someone that Christmas Eve 1944 took everything from me, but also gave me a reason to keep breathing? I guess I should start at the beginning. December 24, 1944. Somewhere in the Ardennes forest, Belgium. We were dug in deep, trying to stay warm in foxholes that felt more like frozen graves. The Battle of the Bulge was raging all around us, but that night, that one night, we got a break. Our CO said we could take a few hours. Rest. Try to remember we were human beings and not just killing machines. There were 12 of us in that bunker. 12 men who'd become brothers. We'd seen things together that would haunt us forever, done things we'd never speak of again. But that night, we were just boys. Boys trying to pretend we were home. Thompson, we called him Tommy, found an old crate and turned it upside down. Someone had a tin of cookies their mother sent. They were stale, probably baked 2 months ago, but we didn't care. Ramirez had somehow held on to a flask of whiskey through 3 months of combat. He passed it around, and each man took just a sip, making it last. Private James Wilson, we called him Jimmy, he was the youngest of us all. 19 years old with a baby face and eyes that still believed the world was good. He sat in the corner, and his hands were shaking as he pulled out a letter. "It came this morning," he said, his voice cracking. "From Margaret." Margaret. His wife. They'd gotten married 3 weeks before he shipped out. 3 weeks of marriage, and then 6 months of hell. Jimmy's hands trembled as he unfolded that letter. It was wrinkled, like he'd read it 100 times already. Maybe he had. "Dear Jimmy," he read aloud, and his voice was so soft we all had to lean in to hear. "I have news that I've been waiting to share with you. We're going to have a baby." The bunker went silent. Completely silent. Then Tommy let out a whoop that echoed off the concrete walls. Ramirez clapped Jimmy on the back. We were all grinning like idiots, passing that flask around again, toasting to new life in the middle of all this death. "A baby," Jimmy kept saying, tears streaming down his face. "I'm gonna be a father." He looked up at all of us with those young eyes, and he said, "When I get home, I'm gonna hold that baby every single day. I'm gonna teach him to play baseball. I'm gonna read him stories every night. I'm gonna." "You're gonna be a great dad," I told him. And I meant it. After Jimmy's news, something shifted in that bunker. It was like we all remembered there was a world outside the war. A world worth getting back to. Sergeant Frank Morrison pulled out a photograph. His hands were scarred and calloused from years of hard labor before the war. He'd been a factory worker in Detroit. 42 years old, with a wife and 3 daughters waiting for him. "This is Linda," he said, showing us the picture. A pretty woman with dark hair and a warm smile. "We got married 15 years ago. Best decision I ever made." He traced his finger over the photograph, so gentle. Like he was afraid he might smudge her face. "When I get home," Frank said quietly, "I'm gonna take her dancing. Every Saturday night, just like we used to. Before the kids. Before the war. I'm gonna hold her close and remember what it feels like to be alive." Corporal David Chen had a letter too. He was from San Francisco, 24 years old, an artist before the war. He had a girlfriend named Susan who wrote him every week. Her letters were filled with descriptions of the city, the fog rolling in over the bay, the sound of the cable cars. "She says she's waiting for me," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "She says she doesn't care how long it takes. She'll wait. He looked down at the letter, and a tear fell onto the paper. "I'm gonna marry her the day I get back," he whispered. "I'm not waiting another second. Life's too short." Private Robert O'Brien, Bobby, was the joker of our group. Always had something funny to say, always knew how to make us laugh when things got dark. But that night, he wasn't joking. "My kid brother Eddie," Bobby said, pulling out a photograph of a boy about 12 years old. "He writes me letters. Tells me about his baseball games, his grades at school. He looks up to me." Bobby's voice cracked. "I gotta get home," he said. "I gotta make sure Eddie grows up right. Becomes a good man. Better than me." "You're a good man, Bobby," Tommy said. "Nah," Bobby replied, shaking his head. "But I could be. When I get home, I could be." We went around the bunker like that. Each man sharing his dreams. His hopes. His reasons for fighting. Lieutenant Marcus Cole was from Mississippi. He had a 6-year-old son named James who'd never met him. Marcus shipped out before the boy was born, and he'd only seen photographs. "I don't even know what his voice sounds like," Marcus said quietly. 6 years old, and I've never heard him laugh. Private Anthony Russo was engaged to a girl named Maria. They'd grown up on the same street in Brooklyn, known each other their whole lives. The ring was already bought, sitting in a drawer in his mother's house. "Soon as I get home," Tony said, "I'm putting that ring on her finger. We're gonna have a big Italian wedding. The whole neighborhood's gonna be there." Corporal William Patterson, Will, was the quiet one. Barely spoke most days. But that night, he opened up. "My father died when I was 10, he said. "My mother raised 4 kids on her own. Worked 2 jobs. Never complained." He looked down at his hands. "I need to get home," he said. "I need to tell her thank you. I need to tell her I love her. I should have said it more." Even Tommy, the loudest of us all, got serious. He talked about his 2 little sisters. How he used to chase them around the yard when they were kids. How he promised he'd come home and walk them both down the aisle someday. "They're 15 and 17 now," Tommy said. "Growing up without me. I gotta get back before they forget what I look like." Private Daniel Murphy was from a farm in Iowa. He talked about the corn fields, the smell of earth after rain, the sound of his dog barking when he came home from school. "Simple things," Danny said. "That's all I want. Just simple things." And Private Harold Lewis, Harry, he was the oldest after Frank. 38 years old, a schoolteacher before the war. He talked about his students, how much he missed teaching, how he wanted to get back to shaping young minds instead of taking lives. "This war has taken enough," Harry said. "When I get home, I'm gonna spend every day trying to make the world a little better. One kid at a time." They all turned to me eventually. 12 pairs of eyes, waiting. "What about you, Sam?" Jimmy asked. "What are you going home to?" I didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was, I didn't have anyone. My parents died when I was young. I grew up in foster homes, bouncing from place to place. Never stayed anywhere long enough to call it home. Never had anyone to miss me. The army was the first place I ever felt like I belonged. "I got you guys," I finally said, trying to smile. "That's enough." But Frank shook his head. "When we get home," Frank said firmly, "you're coming to Detroit. You're gonna have dinner with my family. My daughters make the best apple pie you've ever tasted. And then you're coming to San Francisco," David added. "Susan would love to meet you. We'll show you the Golden Gate Bridge. Brooklyn after that," Tony said, grinning. "You'll be sick of Italian food by the time Maria's done with you." They went on like that, planning out my future. Each of them claiming me for holidays, for dinners, for birthdays. Making me part of their families before I ever met them. "You're not alone, Sam," Jimmy said quietly. You got all of us. And our families? They're your family too. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. So I just nodded. That's when Tommy started singing. His voice was rough and off-key, but he sang Silent Night anyway. One by one, we all joined in. 12 voices in a concrete bunker, surrounded by war, singing about peace on earth. I remember thinking, in that moment, that this was what I was fighting for. Not for countries or politics or generals. But for this. For brotherhood. For love. For the chance to go home and build something good. The explosion came at 11:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I was looking at my watch. Thinking about how it was almost Christmas. Almost a new day. Then the world turned to fire. The Germans had found our position. A mortar shell, perfectly aimed. It hit the bunker dead center. I don't remember the sound. I don't remember the pain. I just remember the light, so bright it turned night into day, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a field hospital. 3 days later. Both my legs were broken. My arm was shattered. My face was covered in burns and cuts. But I was alive. The medic who told me about the others, his name was Patterson, no relation to our Will, he had tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, soldier, he said. You were the only one who made it. 11 men. 11 brothers. All gone in an instant. Jimmy Wilson, who was going to be a father. Frank Morrison, who wanted to dance with his wife. David Chen, who was going to marry Susan. Bobby O'Brien, who wanted to raise his little brother right. Marcus Cole, who never got to hear his sons laugh. Tony Russo and his Italian wedding. Will Patterson and his mother. Tommy Thompson and his little sisters. Danny Murphy and his simple farm. Harry Lewis and his students. And Lieutenant Samuel Brooks, our CO, who I haven't even told you about. A good man who led us through hell with kindness. All of them. Gone. And me? I lived. The war ended 5 months later. May 8, 1945. VE Day. Victory in Europe. I was in a veterans' hospital in England when I heard the news. People were celebrating, dancing in the streets, kissing strangers. The war was over. We'd won. But I couldn't celebrate. Because what was the point of victory when the men who fought for it were dead? I spent 6 months in that hospital. Learning to walk again. Learning to use my left arm again. Learning to look at my face in the mirror without flinching. When they finally discharged me, they asked where I wanted to go. Where was home? I didn't have an answer. They sent me back to the States anyway. Put me on a ship with 1,000 other veterans, all of us broken in different ways. I ended up in a boarding house in Philadelphia. Got a job at a factory. Kept my head down. Tried not to think about that Christmas Eve. But at night, I heard their voices. Jimmy reading his letter. Frank talking about dancing. David planning his proposal. Bobby joking. Marcus dreaming about his son. I heard them singing Silent Night. And I couldn't breathe. It took me 2 years to get sober enough to think straight. 2 years of drinking myself to sleep every night, trying to drown out the voices. But they wouldn't leave me alone. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m., and Jimmy's voice was so clear it was like he was sitting right next to me. I'm gonna hold that baby every single day. And I realized, someone had to. Not me, obviously. That baby had a mother. But someone needed to tell Margaret that her husband died thinking about his child. Someone needed to tell her that his last words were full of love. Someone needed to keep the promise that Jimmy couldn't keep. I got out of bed and pulled out the box I'd been hiding under my bunk. The army had given it to me when I was discharged. Personal effects of your unit, they called it. Letters, photographs, dog tags. Everything they'd recovered from the bunker. I'd never opened it. Couldn't bring myself to. But that night, I did. Inside were 11 lives. 11 stories cut short. And I decided, I would finish them. Margaret Wilson lived in a small town in Ohio. It took me 3 weeks to find her address. Another week to work up the courage to knock on her door. When she opened it, she was holding a little boy. 2 years old, with Jimmy's eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. I couldn't speak for a long moment. Just stared at that child. Jimmy's son. The baby he never got to meet. "My name is Samuel Grant," I finally said. "I served with your husband." Her face went pale. "Would you like to come in?" she asked quietly. We sat in her small living room, and I told her everything. About that Christmas Eve. About Jimmy reading her letter. About how happy he was. About how he'd planned to be the best father in the world. "He loved you so much," I said. "And he was so proud. So excited about the baby." Margaret was crying silently, holding her son close. "James," she whispered. "I named him James. After his father." "That's a good name," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Jimmy's dog tags. "These are his," I said. "I thought you might want them. For James. When he's older." Margaret took them with shaking hands. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for telling me." Before I left, she stopped me at the door. "Mr. Grant," she said. "Would you like to hold him? Just for a moment?" I looked down at little James Wilson. 2 years old, with his father's eyes and his mother's smile. "I'd be honored," I said. When Margaret placed him in my arms, something broke open inside me. This child. This beautiful, perfect child. He was Jimmy's legacy. Proof that love could survive even the worst darkness. "Your daddy was a hero," I whispered to James. "And he loved you before you were even born." Frank Morrison's wife Linda lived in Detroit, just like he'd said. She was working 2 jobs, raising 3 daughters alone. When I showed up at her door, she knew immediately why I was there. "He's not coming home, is he?" she asked. "No, ma'am," I said quietly. "I'm so sorry." She invited me in anyway. Her daughters, Rebecca, Sarah, and Emily, were 15, 12, and 9. They'd been waiting for their father for 3 years. I told them about Frank. About how he talked about them every day. About how he carried their photograph everywhere. About how his last thoughts were of taking Linda dancing. "He wanted to take you dancing," I told Linda. "Every Saturday night. Just like you used to." Linda smiled through her tears. "We met at a dance," she said. "Did he tell you that?" "He did," I said. "He said marrying you was the best decision he ever made." Linda broke down then. Sobbed in a way that made my chest hurt. Her daughters gathered around her, all of them crying together. Before I left, Linda hugged me. "Thank you for bringing him home to us," she said. "Even if it's just his memory." Over the next 5 years, I found them all. I went to San Francisco and met Susan Chen. She'd waited for David, just like she promised. When I told her he'd planned to propose the moment he got home, she smiled sadly. "I would have said yes," she said. I gave her the sketch David had made of her. He'd drawn it from memory during a quiet moment in the bunker. She'd never seen it. "He was a beautiful artist," she whispered. I went to Brooklyn and found Maria Russo. She'd gotten married to someone else. Had 2 kids. But when I gave her Tony's letters, she cried like it was yesterday. "I loved him," she said. "I need you to know that. I loved him so much. But I couldn't wait forever. He would have understood," I told her. He would have wanted you to be happy. I went to Mississippi and found Marcus Cole's son James. He was 11 years old now, and he'd never met his father. What was he like? James asked me. I told him everything. About Marcus's bravery. His kindness. His deep, aching wish to hear his son's voice. He loved you, I said. More than anything in the world. James cried, and I held him while he did. This boy who'd grown up without a father. This boy who deserved so much more than the world had given him. I found Bobby O'Brien's brother Eddie. He was 20 years old, working construction, trying to support their mother. Bobby wanted you to grow up right, I told Eddie. He wanted you to be a good man. Did he think I wouldn't be? Eddie asked, almost defensive. No, I said. He just wanted to be there to help you. That's what big brothers do. I found Will Patterson's mother in Virginia. She was 68 years old, still working as a seamstress. When I told her that Will's last thoughts were of thanking her, she put her hand over her heart. He was a good boy, she said. All 4 of my children were good. But Will was special. So quiet. So thoughtful. He wanted you to know he loved you, I said. He wanted to say it more. I knew, she whispered. A mother always knows. I found Tommy Thompson's sisters. They were 25 and 27 now. Both married. Both with children of their own. He wanted to walk you down the aisle, I told them. We waited, the younger sister, Annie, said. We waited 3 years before we got married. Hoping he'd come home. But he never did. He would have been so proud of you both, I said. I found Danny Murphy's family farm in Iowa. His parents were still there, older and frielier but still working the land. This is what Danny loved, his father said, gesturing to the fields. This earth. This simple life. He talked about it all the time, I said. The smell of rain on the dirt. The sound of his dog barking. He just wanted to come home. We all want to come home, his mother said quietly. I found Harry Lewis's school in Massachusetts. He'd been a teacher there for 12 years before the war. They'd kept his classroom exactly as he left it. He was beloved, the principal told me. It took me 5 years to find them all. 5 years of traveling across the country. 5 years of knocking on doors and delivering grief. Every time I told a story, I relived that night. Every time I handed over a photograph or a letter or a dog tag, I felt the explosion all over again. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the most important. Because these families deserved to know. They deserved to know that their husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, they didn't die alone. They died surrounded by brothers. They died with hope in their hearts and love on their lips. They died on Christmas Eve, dreaming of home. After I finished, I didn't know what to do with myself. The mission was complete. The promises were kept. But I was still here. Still alive. Still alone. I moved around a lot. Couldn't settle anywhere. Worked odd jobs. Tried to find a purpose. The nightmares never stopped. The guilt never faded. Why did I survive when 11 better men died? What made me special? What made me worthy? I spent 30 years asking those questions. 30 years with no answer. I thought about ending it, more than once. Thought about joining my brothers. Maybe they were waiting for me somewhere. Maybe death would finally bring me peace. But every time I got close, I heard their voices again. You're not alone, Sam. You got all of us. And I realized, I couldn't give up. Because they couldn't. Last year, on Christmas Eve, 76 years after that night, I got a letter in the mail. The return address was from Ohio. From Margaret Wilson. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter written in shaky handwriting. Dear Mr. Grant. My name is James Wilson Jr. You might not remember me, but you held me when I was 2 years old. My mother told me about your visit. About how you served with my father. About how you told her the story of his last night. My mother passed away last month. She was 96 years old. Before she died, she made me promise to find you. To tell you something. She said you saved her life. After my father died, she wanted to give up. She was pregnant, alone, heartbroken. But then you came to her door. And you told her that my father died full of love. Full of hope. Full of joy about meeting me. And she decided that if my father could face death with that much love, she could face life. She raised me alone. Worked hard. Made sure I grew up knowing who my father was. She never remarried. Said she'd already had her great love. I'm 78 years old now. I have 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. All of them exist because my father loved my mother. And because you made sure she knew it. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for bringing my father home to us. You gave my mother a reason to live. And in doing so, you gave life to all of us. We are your family too. Just like those men promised you that night. If you're able, please come visit us. We'd be honored to meet you. With gratitude and love. James Wilson Jr. I cried for 3 hours after reading that letter. Cried for all the years I'd spent thinking I was alone. Cried for all the guilt I'd carried. Cried for the brothers I lost and the families I'd found. And then I booked a ticket to Ohio. I'm sitting in James Wilson Jr.'s living room right now as I tell you this story. His children and grandchildren are here. His great-grandchildren are playing on the floor. Above the fireplace is a photograph of Jimmy Wilson in his uniform. Next to it are his dog tags, the ones I gave Margaret 76 years ago. And all around me are people who wouldn't exist if not for that Christmas Eve. If not for Jimmy's love. If not for my promise. Over the years, I've stayed in touch with all of them. Margaret's family. Linda's daughters. Susan Chen's children, yes, she eventually married and named her son David. Maria Russo's grandchildren. Marcus Cole's descendants. Bobby O'Brien's family. Will Patterson's nieces and nephews. Tommy Thompson's sister's children. Danny Murphy's cousins. Harry Lewis's former students who became teachers themselves. All of them. Connected by grief. Connected by love. Connected by 11 men who died too young and 1 man who lived too long. They've become my family. Just like those 11 men promised me that night. I'm 82 years old now. I've lived longer than I ever thought I would. Longer than I deserved to. But I finally understand why I survived. It wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It wasn't fate. I survived because someone had to tell their stories. Someone had to keep their promises. Someone had to make sure their love didn't die with them. I survived because love needed a witness. And now, all these years later, I can finally say, the promises are kept. The stories are told. The love lives on. I'm not alone anymore. I never was. I was just too broken to see it. Tonight is Christmas Eve. Just like it was 76 years ago. In a few hours, James Wilson Jr.'s family will gather around the dinner table. They'll say grace. They'll share a meal. They'll laugh and tell stories. And before we eat, James will stand up and make a toast. He does it every year. He'll raise his glass and say, to the 12 men of Christmas Eve, 1944. To the brothers who didn't make it home. To the love they left behind. And to Samuel Grant, who made sure that love survived. And I'll raise my glass with tears in my eyes, surrounded by a room full of people I love, people who love me back. And I'll think about Jimmy and Frank and David and Bobby and Marcus and Tony and Will and Tommy and Danny and Harry and Lieutenant Brooks. And I'll whisper, I kept my promise, brothers. I kept my promise. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Keep our promises. Share our love. Tell our stories. And hope that when we're gone, someone remembers that we were here. That we loved. That we mattered. I matter because they loved me. And I loved them back. That's the story. That's what I wanted to tell you. Thank you for listening. Merry Christmas.